Welcome, and thank you for joining us. This evening, we have former Governor Gary Johnson joining us. He's a two-term governor of New Mexico who was able to turn their deficit back into a financial asset to the state. He is currently running under the Libertarian ticket for president after withdrawing from the Republican nomination. He's a big supporter of cannabis for social and medical uses, and also for hemp for industrial use. We will be discussing our families, education, medical cannabis use, and Gary Johnson's own experience with his accidents in cannabis. Family communication seems to be a very important component of your position on cannabis for social use as well as medical use. Being a father, what are the dynamics that you feel are critical to bring up in a conversation with your son or daughter? Obviously, your son's a lot older here, but if it were just any parent speaking to their son or daughter, considering that the children nowadays are confronted with the DARE program and their teachers and so on and so forth in school, where's the separation between school and family in that situation?
Well, when I launched into looking at the war on drugs and when I advocated legalizing marijuana in New Mexico, Eric was 18 years old, and Eric said, "Hey man, help me understand what you're saying." And we had a 3-hour conversation regarding drugs, and what I wanted Eric to know is that first and foremost that I love him and his sister, and that it would be naive of me to think that they wouldn't use illegal drugs. Now, illegal drugs, what's the problem with illegal drugs? Well, first, quality, quantity unknown. You have no idea what it is that you're using. And then secondly, if that's not an issue, then you're up against the criminal justice system when you use this stuff. But I would still be naive to think that my kids might not use or try illegal drugs, marijuana. So what I wanted to make clear to both of them was that first and foremost, I loved both of them. First and foremost, period. And that if they found themselves in a situation where they had used illegal drugs or alcohol or whatever substance and found themselves impaired, I wanted them to call me, to have me come pick them up, no questions asked, because I love them. And so the implications of that is that families do face issues with drug use, marijuana. And a lot of families don't want their kids smoking marijuana. Well, that's okay. But the reality is, half of the graduating class of the year 2012 did illegal drugs. Actually, looking ahead here to the graduating class, half of them are gonna end up having used illegal drugs, marijuana. Do we really want half of our kids subject to the criminal justice system? Because that's exactly what we're looking at if the law is implemented to its fullest extent.
Right, and those are serious consequences. I myself was facing prison for cannabis possession about 3 years ago. I wasn't a kid, but it's still just as frightening.
When I came out espousing legalizing marijuana, I was absolutely blown away by how many leading citizens in New Mexico came to see me to tell me about their arrest records and their prior drug convictions. Stalwarts of the community that had been subject to the criminal justice system.
It's the one thing I find very amazing to myself over the last couple of years is to really learn who in our population does use cannabis, and it's all of us.
It's everyone. It's everyone. And if I'm one of the 100 million Americans who have smoked marijuana, and but for the wrong set of circumstances, I would be behind bars myself.
Right. Thank you very much for answering that. That's a critical issue to me because I have a son who's growing up and I have these same issues to confront. I feel that being very open about these topics is the first and foremost place to start from.
I gave a presentation at a high school in Albuquerque my final year in office, and there was a parent who took a very highly publicized Johnson is so wrong to be out promoting drug use. And my press secretary, who was at the event, she said, was it the 28 times that Governor Johnson said don't do drugs? And what was objectionable about well, first off, he talked about not doing drugs 28 times, and then he coupled that 8 times with the fact that he didn't want to see any of those kids in jail
Right.
for what by many would classify as a bad decision.
And unfortunately, it's more than jail nowadays. It takes away our opportunity for financial aid for schools, potential applications for jobs, and so on and so forth down the road.
It does, and I've always maintained that marijuana is safer than alcohol. I've always maintained that by legalizing marijuana, we would actually have less overall substance abuse because marijuana would be a much safer alternative than alcohol for a lot of people.
And that's actually one of the reasons I have Marijuana is Safer here from Steve Fox and Paul and Mason, which refers to the press conference that you had yesterday in your support of treating marijuana like alcohol with that regulatory system.
I think Colorado has the opportunity here to change drug policy nationwide and subsequently worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big opportunity.
Everybody's watching at this point. It's pretty amazing.
Everybody's watching, and because people are watching, it gets talked about. And the more people talk about this issue, the better the issue does. It's not an issue. In 1999, 30% of Americans supported legalizing marijuana. Today, 50% of Americans support legalizing marijuana. Which direction is that trend moving, and which direction does that trend continue to move in, and why does it do that? Why is it moving in that direction? It's because people are talking about it. People are understanding the issue better, and that's all good. So even if the Colorado initiative falls short, it's going to bring about a lot more awareness, and that 50% is going to continue to build.
On the other side of the coin is the hemp uses for cannabis. And so not only medical use, but we also have all the industrial uses and so on and so forth. So to date, we have about 31 states who have introduced a hemp bill or legislation, and 6 states have passed hemp study bills. Currently, Colorado has a hemp bill I helped author. It was HB 12-1099. I know New Mexico also has HB 62, which I read in detail last night, and I found that very interesting because it talks about using Xanthica, which is actually a variety of hemp, and nowhere in that document does it actually say hemp. So in any case, what we see is there's a lot of momentum. It's coming from all sorts of states and at all different levels. My question is really, considering the DEA's stance on this, that they can't differentiate industrial hemp or medical hemp or recreational hemp, and they're the only ones who seem to be against this. When we take into account the 10th Amendment and states' rights, what do you see as a path to move towards so that we can address the fears of the DEA?
Well, first of all, I think that hemp use, growing it, using it, is just a no-brainer. And I think that the roots of it being banned is, of course, marijuana prohibition. And legalizing marijuana, I just think this is another one of those no-brainers that, well, of course, we should allow and promote hemp growth and use.
What do you think the tipping point's going to be for the DEA? Is it going to be 25 states or 50 states, 40 states? Is it going to be something else that happens?
I'm gonna offer up that one state provides the tipping point. That when one state falls, it's going to be a domino effect, and everyone is going to quickly follow suit. I think we saw the same thing with alcohol prohibition, and the fact that my understanding is the first domino that fell was New York by telling the federal government we're no longer going to enforce federal alcohol prohibition laws. You can enforce them all you want, and that was the first domino. The
tipping point, if you will.
That was the tipping point.
It's an exciting place to be right now, being close to that tipping point.
It is, and all, at least for myself, I graduated from high school in 1971. I have to say, Jason, 40 years later, I did not think this was going to be an issue. I thought this was going to long have been taken care of.
I hear that from a lot of people, yeah.
And it still hasn't been, and, well, I don't want to go to my grave thinking that I coulda, shoulda, woulda on anything, but certainly this issue.
Well, your speaking out is like you said earlier, it's a key piece, and every one of us who does that is contributing to the bigger picture, and we will accomplish this, I think.
Yes, we will.
We both have a lot of sports interests.
I see that, yeah.
I was a big skier. I was a telemark skier, snowboarder. I taught handicap skiing for many years, and that's where I actually had my accident. I was into paragliding. I enjoy flying large kites. I've got a 10-meter kite that is a blast to take out in the snow, and sometimes I'll sit my son in my lap and we'll slide around in the snow and slid around. But I understand that you had a couple accidents also, and so tying this into pain mitigation specifically, how did you mitigate your pain with prescription medication?
Well, so I had a horrible paragliding accident 6 years ago. And I had a burst fracture of my 12th T vertebrae.
Wow.
I had meniscus damage in both knees. I separated my ACL. I had 6 broken ribs.
Wow.
And prognosis for me was that I had, first of all, that I was never going to recover.
Mm-hmm.
That this was the end of physical activity as I knew it. And then secondly was the fact that I was supposed to lay on the floor for 6 weeks for my back to gain stability. Well, that was on the floor, eating, sleeping, with the exception of going to the bathroom. And I was prescribed painkillers, which I have used on a handful of occasions before in my life, and I've hated it every time I've used painkillers. The painkillers for me has resulted in worse consequences when I go off the painkillers than the pain that they relieved while I was on them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just an avowed no painkiller. I think there's some real problems with painkillers. Anyway, I find myself with looking at 6 weeks on the floor, and a friend came by at that point and said, "Gary, could I get you some marijuana to deal with this?" And I thought, what a great idea, that would help me out a lot. And so it took me 3 years to recover from that accident, but I completely recovered from the accident, and I think marijuana played a key in helping me out, helping me through all that.